Hey, Egg Teacher Thoughts here coming at you with another video. This video again is if you've missed class or if you were just following along on our YouTube channel. So what we're going to talk about right now is choosing our plants that we want to put in our containers for the shape and their growth habit. So growth habit, shape, really kind of the same thing, but what we're really talking about is figuring out which plants go up, which plants go out, which plants get bushy, and which plants trail or spread along the ground. So it's something that you should be aware of that each plant itself has a different habit in which it grows. And that's referring to whether a plant goes up and starts reaching for the sunlight, whether it stays down and low and tries to cover the ground, whether it forms kind of a moundy, dense bush, or if it's, just kind of plain crazy in its growth habit. And there are some out there that have absolute bizarre growth habits. But to kind of give you an idea, I've got a couple of them here. So this is Thunbergia. We'll look at this one in a little bit. Thunbergia is a climbing vine. So this is a vine that most people say, hey, it's a vine, it's going to trail down. No, Thunbergia goes up. It climbs up. It'll climb your hangers. It'll climb to the top of your greenhouse if you let it. And here's another one here. Here are impatiens. People love to put impatiens in baskets, but one of the problems when they're in baskets is impatiens like to go up. They don't like to trail down. So if you put them in a basket, they're going to be mounding and kind of like have a top hairdo, and they kind of have sharp edges at the edge of the pot. So when we're making a basket, we need to be aware of the growth habit for the plant so that what we're looking to get out of our container is what we get. So like the slide says, some grow up, some trail down, some form a clump, some creep along the ground, and some are just kind of wacky and crazy. So let's look at some of those little habits. So here's an example of plants that have an upright growing habit. So on the left, you'll see the red flower there. That is celosia. And celosia tends to want to grow up. So the comb of that celosia is always going to be at the top of the container. Next to the right, we have a style of white salvia. And then the next one is a type of dianthus, which is really closely related to carnations. So carnations and dianthus, they're in the same family, but dianthus tend to have a single or a double row of petals, not like the multiple petals that you'd see in a carnation. Then upper right is Gaura, otherwise known as whirling butterfly. That used to have a crazy, crazy growth habit, but they've calmed it down through a bunch of selective breeding, and now I would call it just an upright plant. And in the lower right-hand corner, we're going to give you the fun name for this one. This is known as bat face flower, like, squeaky flying in the middle of the night bat. If you look real close, you'll see that's bat face flower. Now, all of these plants that we have in here are designed to grow up, so it's not something that we would actually place in a hanging basket. So in hanging baskets, we want things that mound and we want things that trail. And these are going to go straight up. So if you put them in a hanging basket, they're going to kind of look weird. It's going to be like you have a little skyscraper at the top of your basket. So when you're designing the container, understand baskets don't need upright things, but planters or containers on the ground do. So we'll be looking at those. So these are a whole selection of plants that trail. And I told you you'd see this one again. So Thunbergia, it's that way, all the way to the far left. That is Thunbergia. Now you'll see in that basket, this does trail down. However, there is a stake at the top of that basket that has the name of the plant, and that Thunbergia has grown all the way up across the top of that. So these are trailing plants, but some of them do want to go upright. In the middle, we have a Vinca major, and on the far right, we have a sweet potato, and I believe that is sweet potato limelights. Now, all of these are great to put in hanging baskets. So we want things in hanging baskets that give us some length, give us some size to that basket, and add to the overall foliage. So these are all great ones to put in a hanging basket. But there are some considerations, and we can talk about these when we get to some of the plants in the future. It is good to have certain plants that trail, but in some locations, certain plants are not great for hanging baskets. Like the one in the middle, that one is Vinca major. a great trailer, but if it touches the ground and gets established, that can actually be an invasive species. So we want to be careful what we select. But right now, when we're talking about shape, these are all of our kinds of plants that trail, and we need those in a hanging basket. And as far as a planter, you're probably not necessarily going to put these in a planter or in a patio container. These are going to be reserved for baskets themselves. Next, we're moving on to our clump forming plants. So in there, you're going to have all sorts of plants that just like form this half globe or this clump or this mound on the top of your basket or container. Now, some people would say, well, for a hanging basket, I don't really want anything that goes upright. Well, yes, you don't want upright growers, but you do want clump forming plants. So geraniums, lobularia, other things like that. And there's a whole list of stuff that's mounding or clump forming. Those are great to put in a hanging basket because as all your trailing plants start to age throughout the season, they're going to have spots up top where there's no leaves. And these clump forming plants fill in that location and, cover up the male pattern baldness that happens on baskets by the end of the season. So yes, clump forming plants are very important in baskets as well as containers because you're going to use those in both. So you're going to have some that are upright in your container, some that kind of clump form or hang down a little bit. Then in your hanging basket, you have the real long trailers, and then you have a clump forming, and then you have some intermediates in there. So we'll look at those too. So the next thing that we're going to look at is plants that creep along the ground. And again, I have a whole catalog of plants that do different things. So on this far right over here, you're going to see that there is Scaevola, it's also known as fan flower or half flower. And that one is one that more spreads out. It goes up a little bit, but it's more spreading out. So if you put this in a hanging basket, it's going to come down, about a third of the pot, but it wants to go out. This is a really good one to actually put in patio containers or ground-based pots, or even in bedding locations, because it does like to spread across the ground and it uses that ground for support. So that's one that kind of creeps along the ground. Now, the other one, looking at this guy over here, the reason I put that one in there, it does trail down, but that one is also known as Creeping Charlie. It's one of many, many plants that have the name Creeping Charlie. I can think of 5 or 6 plants that the nursery industry says, that's Creeping Charlie. No, there's a lot of them. But this one, it is a very long trailer. So if you put this in a basket and you have a nice warm growing area and a long growing season, this plant can easily travel down 6, 7, or even 8 feet by the end of the season. So this one, if it gets established in the ground and you have an area where it can survive climate-wise, it is going to form a thick mat, and a really thick mat of leaf material. Will keep other plants from coming up. But this one does like to creep along the ground. It is good for filling in and giving, it's a kind of a dusty lime color. And there's white variegation in there, but it gives kind of a dusty look to the area. So it works really well. So yeah, we've got many different types of shapes there, and these are kind of some of the ones that will creep along the ground for you. Now, there are some plants that do have some really crazy growth habits, and the 2 plants featured here, they've been calmed down a lot. So when licorice vine, which is the one directly above me, when that was first released, it was a crazy growth habit. It would like to send runners out like 2 feet, and it'd have just a couple of branches on 2 feet of branches, and they stuck straight out. They were just a real crazy grower. And since they were first released, they've done a lot of work to really calm this one down. So now it's more mounding or clump forming, but you can still get the wild and crazy one, which is pretty cool. And then the one over there, all the way on the far side, that's Bidens or Bidens, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Again, when this was first released to the market and it was just available in yellow, it had pretty long internodal lengths and was just absolutely massive when it was growing. In fact, the reason I put these 2 here on this slide is when they first came out, my father and I had a crazy idea to put these 2 plants together in a hanging basket. So we had 2 Bidens and 2 licorice vine in a basket, and it was, I think it was a 12-inch round pot. And it formed absolutely massive baskets. They were probably almost 4 foot across. So we had to do a lot of pruning to get them crazy. And we called them big, ugly baskets because they were massive. They were huge. We didn't care for them, but our customers went absolutely crazy over these ginormous baskets. So you can find some plants that are going to have pretty crazy or wild growth habits. So it just kind of depends on whether or not you get those, and you're going to have to do a little research to make sure you know which type of plant you are including in your basket. So if you're just starting out in the greenhouse industry, or you're planting and designing your own baskets, I will say probably the most important thing you need to do is have a plan of how you're going to put your basket together. So you kind of need to know where is its location going to be, and kind of what you want out of it. And this shot is a really great example of baskets that have been specifically planned and planters that have been specifically planned for a purpose. So if you look on the left-hand side, that is a wall, and it says, "I have heart." In the center, we have a flower bed that has, 50 or 75 baskets on it, just a massive number of baskets, and it's well over 100 feet long. And then there's a flower bed down below it. And on the far right, we have baskets that were designed to fit amongst the structure in one of the flower beds. So there's upright plants, there's mounding plants, there's trailing plants. There's all sorts of different shapes that come together to form kind of an image or an idea of what that nurseryman had. Now that we know that plants have different shapes, and we need to kind of know some information about where we're going to put them and other things like that, we need to make a plan. So in our plan, we're going to choose our location, our shape, our size, our color, and the effect that we want to do. So on this first, you've got that template right there in front of you. You're going to place your name right at the top of that. And then you're going to choose where that basket is going to be sited. So you'll find out later about this, but plants have different areas that they like to grow. Some like to grow in the sun, some like to grow in the shade, and some of them like part shade. So we need to know, are we going to put a basket that's going to grow in the sun? Is that where we're going to put this one? Or is this one need to have shade because it's got more sensitive and tender plants in it? Next thing we need to know is, what size container are we growing? Now, if we're doing a shade basket, you might find that we're using a smaller container, like a 10-inch square pot. Or if we're doing a sun basket, we're going to be using a 12-inch round pot. And the difference in that is the volume of the soil and the number of plants. So with that, the options that we have right now are 10, 12, 16, and 18-inch baskets. And then we need to know kind of what effect we're wanting to have out that. Is it going to be a trailing basket, semi-trailing, or an upright container? So you need to write that down. What type of effect are you going for? And then lastly, we need to look at the basket material. Now, there are 3 different options. So you have waxed pulp, which is paper that's been impregnated with paraffin wax. You have molded injected or blow mold plastic, and then you have the plastic lined moss baskets. Now here at our greenhouse, we specifically use the pulp baskets. And this is for many different reasons, which we're gonna cover a lot further in another lecture. But the pulp baskets, I found over the decades that I've been a nurseryman, they provide the best environment for our plants. They provide a little bit of insulation from the heat. There is a little bit of gas transfer through that basket, and it's really the best basket material that you can choose environmentally. Because with that, we're not harvesting moss out of the forest. We're not lining that with a sheet of plastic. We're not injection molding or blow molding plastic that is used for one season and thrown away. When we're using a pulp basket, we're using something that is 100% biodegradable and recyclable. So in there's a metal hanger on the top that can be put in metal recycling. There's 4 brass eyelets, and those can be poked out and also put in metal recycling. And then the pulp basket itself, it is great to go in a compost bin or a compost heap, and it'll completely disappear in 2 to 3 months. It'll be gone. So it is completely compostable. Okay, so now we know what we're going to do. And as my students, you're going to be using pulp baskets. That's just what we're going to do. If you're going to do a patio container, it's going to be a plastic pot. And that's done because pulp pots on patios tend to mold and decay a lot faster. So we don't want the basket falling apart or the pot falling apart before the end of the season. Okay, the last thing we need to know is what variety are we including in our basket. So you're going to be choosing different plants by shape or size. Now, I'm going to cover specifically which ones you're going to choose and our placement of those in the next lecture when it's how to plant a hanging basket. But I want you to go through and select a few varieties that you think would make great combinations. And you're going to see over to the right-hand side, there's a 10-inch, 12-inch, 14, 16, and 18-inch. Now, as you get down to each of those lines that has a different measurement, that's the number of plants that you're going to have in that basket. So our first set of baskets is going to have 4 plants for a 10-inch. We have 5 for a 12, 6 for a 14, 7 for a 16, and 8 for an 18. So you'll plant those, and then the chart down below shows you kind of the arrangement that we'll put those in. And we'll go over that layout in how to plant a basket like a professional, but this is what our template looks like, and this is how you can make a plan to decide what you want to do in a basket. So the most important thing we have when we are making a plan for baskets is that we actually follow through and follow that plan. Now, as long as we've well thought out our layout and our design and the plants that we've chosen, we should be very successful with our baskets and have them turn out the way that we want them. If you make changes on the fly, or if you don't follow your layout plan, that's where we can start to get some really weird, funky looking baskets and containers. If you put an upright plant and put 2 of them on one side and 2 trailers on the other, you're going to have a basket that looks like it's leaning because it's got tall plants on one side and trailers on the other, and the pot's going to be showing, and it's going to look horrible. So most importantly, when we make those plans and we go out to plant all those containers, so we can show that we are professionals, we're going to follow that plan. And the best thing is at the end of the season, we can go through the greenhouse as those plants are ready for sale with our list of our plans and say, I like this one, I like that one. And we can pull those plans and put them in a notebook for next year. And then we can also take the same plans and be like, I don't like that combination. That one didn't work. Let's never plant that again. So it's going to educate us for the future. It's going to help us it's going to help make us have a perfect product, and it's going to make us more successful as greenhouse growers and nurserymen. Anyway, I hope you've learned something. I hope we're traveling along, and I hope you've enjoyed Ag Teacher Thoughts Out.